Hey there, welcome to another edition of Cambridge Inside Out. My name is Robert Winters, and we don't have Susana Segat here this week. She's actually taking a well-deserved vacation, but I do have as the next best thing to Susana is my friend Terry Smith. So hey, Terry, why don't you introduce yourself?
I'm Terry Smith.
Get back in the camera here.
I'm not in camera. Jeez. I'm not used to television. My father once said that I had a perfect face for radio.
Really?
My name's Terry Smith. I'm a 20-year resident of Cambridge. The last 10, I was the Director of Government Affairs with the Cambridge Chamber of Commerce, trained city planner, worked at the Volpe Center in the 90s on transportation and energy issues, and have been watching Cambridge, a lot of Cambridge issues, budget development, all those things, energy for the last 20 years.
You're one of the, I have sort of a class of Cambridge people in the civic sphere who I sort of think of as kind of men for all seasons, men who are, have some involvement in quite a few different things. I actually also know you through Cambridge Democratic City Committee.
Yeah.
And we've had more than a few discussions about proportional representations.
Yeah, we disagree on preferential voting.
Right. But we
including disagreeing on what we call it.
Right, right. But at least we disagree cordially.
That's right. Which is one of the things that that sometimes concerns me in when I was in the chamber and even before, is how often policy issues become personal issues, and it's not just a Cambridge thing. I mean, you look at Washington, you look at a lot of what's going on. People can disagree with each other and still get along. And I grew up in that kind of politics and kind of wish we saw more of it. Actually,
kind of a good connection to that was I think we last saw each other at Walter Sullivan's wake. And if ever you wanted a fine example of a person who may have disagreed on policy matters but still managed to get along with everyone, it was Walter Sullivan.
He was, I only met him after he was on the council, but he was a real interesting guy. And boy, if you wanted somebody to come in and speak at an event that would get you out of there in time, it was Walter.
That's right. I remember when his son Michael became mayor and was sort of officiating the meeting and sort of gaveling through as quickly. I said, boy, he really is his father's son. He really knows how to make it happen.
Absolutely.
Actually, just not to dwell on it so much, but the thing is that it was at Walter's wake, which was actually held up at the Walter J. Sullivan Water Treatment Facility at Fresh Pond, named after Walter, so it was a perfect place, I suppose. But this was, it's an interesting thing. Wakes are, when people pass away, but the thing is, there were also tremendous get-togethers for everyone who knew a person throughout their life. And I have to say, in spite of the fact that this was, commemorating somebody's passing, it was a wonderful time.
Yeah, on a Friday night in the summer, it was. I saw people I haven't seen in a while, and I was there kind of, I guess, 7 o'clock, so fairly late. But it was, and those events, particularly if you're involved in government, if you're involved in politics, wakes have two roles. One is to commemorate the individual, but the other is to reconnect with people who you've known, through the years. And Hickey Funeral Home is at the end of my street, and I've been to wakes people I'd never met. But I knew some member of the family, and somebody grabbed me on my way home from work and say, you have to go to such and such a wake. So they're an interesting piece of Americana.
There was it was like standing in line with a political history of the last 50 years of Cambridge.
Absolutely. Right. And I believe you were actually asked some political history.
I was standing in line. It's true, actually. I think so. It was a Boston Globe reporter went and asked something of someone who then said, "Oh, talk to him, talk to him." So you have to sort of give the years so-and-so was mayor and various other things. It was something. I spent quite a lot of the time in line with former City Councilor Dan Clinton.
Yeah.
And it was really kind of a lot of fun. Actually, one thing, a little interesting story, and I probably I hope I don't regret saying this, but I think it was 3 people ahead of me in line when I arrived was gubernatorial candidate Martha Coakley and her husband. And at some point, I think they kind of, managed to sort of move them through whatever. So it was kind of funny. You know who took her place in line?
Who?
Steve Grossman. I didn't know quite what to make of that, but I thought, well, that's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
But they were waiting patiently in line, and they both would have stayed there for an hour and a half, even though there was a election campaign going on. So that was the respect you show for Walter Sullivan.
Absolutely.
It was really quite something. There were a couple of things here. We'll get into some particular issues in a second here, but one of the things we like to do on this program is just to say a few things that are coming up that people might want to be aware of. There's, I think tonight, actually, right after 7 o'clock tonight, there are some people who have some interest in some of what's going on with some housing proposals up in the Alewife Triangle at 88 Park Drive. So they're actually having a public hearing, which may actually even be a decision-making hearing. I'm not sure. Tonight, up at City Hall Annex, starting at 7 o'clock on 88 Cambridge Park Drive.
It's a planning board meeting.
Planning board, yeah, did I not say that? Planning board meeting, yeah. And, it's sort of a big topic, actually, because this is a project that's going through based on special permit criteria, and that's kind of big in the Cambridge news lately, the whole issue of special permits. Well, I'll just say one other sort of upcoming thing for those who are interested, have some interest in being a good civic doobie and serving on the Cambridge Board of Zoning Appeals. The deadline for that is Friday, September 12th, apply to the city manager. I can certainly provide some more information. Oh, actually, let me just say one other couple of quick announcements so I can at least make sure we get this out of the way, because sometimes I forget, which is tomorrow. So today is August 19th, Tuesday. Tomorrow is Wednesday, August 20th at 2 p.m. And at 2 p.m., again, there's everybody's doing it, I suppose, but it's the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge, where Mayor David Marr and City Manager Rich Rossi will be the featured bucket receivers, though rumor has it that there'll be a number of other city councilors who are also going to get themselves a little wet tomorrow. So anyway, that's at 2 o'clock at City Hall, right in front of the City Hall lawn, Wednesday, August 20th. And we've mentioned this in some previous shows. It's actually related to the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge, is Steve Buckley's Old Time Baseball Game, which is a fundraiser for the same, which is coming up this coming Monday, August 25th at 7 p.m. at St. Peter's Field up on Sherman Street. And if for longtime Canterbridgians and those of us who would love to have been a lifelong Canterbridgian, it's a must-do event.
It's a great event. Steve does a great job with other volunteers. He was someone I chatted with at Walter Sullivan's wake. We talked about baseball games being too long. Yeah. And that old-time game tends to get done in a reasonable amount of time.
That's true. Actually, I saw Steve Buckley at the game. Comedian Jimmy Tingle also at the game. I mean, it really was,
at the wake.
At the wake, excuse me, Walter's wake. It really was people from all walks of life. It was great, actually. So, I'm going to make one personal plug, and then we'll get into some other things here, which is that some of you may know I'm the chair of the AMC local walks committee. We put together a lot of walks and hikes around the greater Boston area. So one of my favorites is actually coming up on Sunday, August 31st. And so I'm sort of extending my own invitation here to those who might be interested. This is one where we start at the Alewife Tea Station, and then we follow Minuteman Bikeway in a chain of parks and cemeteries and reservations, and end at the Oak Grove Station on the Orange Line in Malden. So this is the Parks and Greenways from Cambridge to Malden hike. Probably goes about 8 miles, starts at 9:30 a.m. if you choose to be there, over on at the west side of the Alewife Tea Station where the passenger drop-off is. So anyway, come on by. No need to register, or if you want to contact me, I'll be more than happy to give you some more information on that. So anyway, so that's my immediate list of things coming on here. So Terry.
Yes, Robert.
A lot of things going on around Cambridge these days that are noteworthy. One thing in particular that's been sort of in the news of late has been a certain zoning petition that really the signatories are part of a group called the Cambridge Residents Alliance and others, but the first signer is City Councilor Dennis Carlone, so it is hence called the Carlone petition, which chooses to, if I get the details correct on this, wants to transfer special permit granting authority for large project zoning review,
Yes.
which is a relatively restricted class of special permit process for the city. But the proposal is to transfer it from the planning board, which is currently the permit granting authority, to the city council. And there's been a lot of back and forth about this, and in fact, even an opinion piece in the Boston Globe, what was it, about 4 or 5 days ago, from Paul McMorrow? Last Monday with Paul McMorrow, who's, yeah. So anyway, that's been kind of an interesting thing. It was kind of a mixed letter in that in certain respects it said it's sort of a good thing to sort of be looking at a lot of these issues, but seemed for the most part to be kind of down on the idea of transferring authority to the city council.
Well, and in the column, councilors Carlone and Nazim both talked about how it was important to surface this as an issue, to have a conversation, which is where McMorrow really saw the opportunity. My concern, having spent a lot of time dealing with Cambridge zoning issues, is that the issues people have with our zoning ordinance are largely the result of actions by the city council. So transferring review, further power to the city council, concerns me. We have what I like to call a complex, idiosyncratic, and opaque zoning ordinance. Having dealt with it on very small issues and very big issues, and being actually trained as a planner, it's tough to figure out some things. And one of my favorite stories is I was walking down Mass Avenue one day and noticed a BZA advertisement at a restaurant at the corner, a restaurant on Mass Ave, that was a creperie, and the request was for an easement to allow, or for approval to allow the change of use from a creperie to a Belgian waffle restaurant. So our ordinance, when you have an ordinance that's a point where putting dimples in pancake batter requires what is typically a 4 to 6 month process,
Right.
You have some problems. And it really wasn't the dimples and pancake batters, it's that part of Mass Avenue, I think in the late 90s, restaurants became a use that wasn't permitted.
Right.
Which is something we see throughout the city. About half the parcels in the city are non-conforming to the zoning ordinance. Some since the first zoning ordinance was passed in the 1920s.
26, I believe.
Yeah, I mean the building near Harvard Law School that was originally a pharmacy and most recently was a pizza place, dry cleaner, and ladies' dress shop.
The Three Aces?
The Three Aces.
Yeah.
That was zoned. That block was zoned residential in 1926, and that building was built in 1919. We have a mixed-use city. We have a city where people like to walk. We have a city where people like to be able to interact with their neighborhood and do a lot in their neighborhood. But we have, over time, written a zoning ordinance that makes that harder and harder. And I'm not sure that giving the council additional authority is the right way to go. I've advocated, and I realize this is probably not going to go anywhere, that we should scrap the code, start over, 10% of the city non-conforming, give everybody a little room to grow, and then see what happens. And I think that we would also be able to accomplish a lot of other things around energy, sustainability, and environmental if we were able to make it easier for people to use their properties.
Now, I think as many of the viewers know, the city is engaged in or at least is committed to having what has been called the master plan. But rumor has it that that term is not going over so well. So I've been hearing people using the term the citywide plan. But anyway, it's going to be a process that's going to really they've been having these sort of conversational phase of it, just more as to kind of, get people's feet on the ground about it. But it should really be taken off this coming year, or at least maybe by end of this year, and then it will probably last 2 years. At least I'm saying. In fact, actually, the car loan petition to do the special permit grant authority switch actually has a sunset provision. It's only supposed to last, so you never know with these things, right? But it's only supposed to last for 2.5 years. So it's funny because I think it said 2.5, but then everybody, when they feel like it's about to go down in flames, which I believe is going to happen, they start saying, "Oh, it's only for 2 years." Yeah. Then I heard it, "Oh, it's only for 1.5 years." I don't know what people are going to say next, but it is meant as sort of a temporary.
It's a moratorium fix. Without another name. But we did a moratorium in the late 90s.
All right.
Was
this the IPOPs and?
Yeah, the city began a citywide zoning process. They then cut out East Cambridge because of what was going on at North Point.
Right.
They then cut out
which then
Concord
promptly
Alewife.
stalled. Yeah.
Right. They then cut out Concord Alewife. And the two major things to come out of that, as I recall, one, housing was permitted in every zoning district in the city, to promote housing development. And then the second part was to then reduce the amount of potential development. Industrial and commercial uses were all downzoned.
Right.
So as a result, a number of the zoning changes that have occurred in the last 4 or 5 years are
restorations.
And restorations at a lower level than would have been permitted. The couple of zoning petitions on Mass Avenue, a couple in Kendall Square. Absent that decision, which didn't get a lot of play at the time, the housing part was what was promoted, not the downzoning. We lost some opportunities, and then when it became clear that we were going to have parking lots because it wasn't economical to redevelop the lots, we went through these sort of rough and tumble, which I was in the middle of, processes to upzone. Term I don't like, but
each with their own ensuing public controversy,
and with the developer in each case providing, or the property owner providing, significant funds and other services to the city to basically buy the upzoning. And that's again going back to my suggestion that we start over with how the city's zoned. I'm not sure that's the best way to get where we need to get. The city's collected funds that they're now not sure what they're going to do with. Neighborhoods close to development believe that they should see the more benefit than other neighborhoods. Other neighborhoods say, well, wait a minute, those are people who are getting on the buses, on the trains, driving through our neighborhood to get to your neighborhood. It could have been done a lot cleaner. Fortunately, people still want to come here.
Yeah.
And, as long as the city's budget relies on the property tax, which don't see that changing, and as long as the state and federal government continue to reduce the amount of money that they provide to cities and towns, which has been happening for the last 15 years, 20 years, the city needs some development.
Well, and you should probably add, though it almost goes without saying, and as long as Cambridge remains a generous liberal city that believes in funding a lot of programs of some significance.
$525 million budget this year.
Right.
Which is, I did a projection when I was at the chamber for my members, and I thought the budget this year would be 530 something. So, and I think what happened, I mean, I know what the math problem was in the mid 2000s. The city's healthcare costs were rising at a greater rate than they are now. So,
Right.
So if you look at the average change in those years, it's higher than it's been in the last couple of years. But we're still going to have a $700 million budget within 10 years.
Yeah. Which is probably on a, I don't know if that exceeds any states in the union. It may.
Well, it's possible, but on a per capita basis, it's higher than I think we're already higher than anyone else in the Commonwealth.
Yeah.
I'm almost certain of that. Boston might be close because Boston's budget Boston's about 5.5 times larger than Cambridge, and their budget is about 5.5 times larger than Cambridge's. So,
Yeah. So at least we're sort of on a
at a much higher
par
tax
there.
rate in Boston, by the way.
Yeah. On the zoning matters, my recollection, again, I may miss a detail or two here, but one of the most significant changes that I think happened, and to some degree, I think politically, is sort of a result of the end of rent control, which was 1994-95, was that, which, as you mentioned, the inclusion of housing as an allowable use in all zones in the city. And with that, actually, I'm not sure whether this, whether that happened as part of the whole citywide downzoning or not, or maybe it came a little bit later, actually gave a little bit of it a bonus, a little advantage for building residential. I think in former industrial zones, there was sort of a desire that it would, people would prefer to have housing rather than a kind of a ancient industrial use, or worse, just a derelict piece of property that just sat there, which was also happening. Anyway, it's interesting how now that was, I'm going to put that more or less to about the year 2002. I could be a little off.
Inclusionary came, I don't remember.
That was a little earlier.
The zoning or.
Yeah, inclusionary zoning came a little earlier. Again, that was also part of the outgrowth of the end of rent control. There was a lot of political will to produce affordable housing units.
Right.
But but also just to produce housing units.
Right.
And with that, it ends up being at about 12% of them being so-called affordable units coming with them. So there were zoning changes implemented specifically to produce not only housing but affordable units as well. Some people argue these days that, it should be a higher percentage or whatever, but it was clearly promoting housing as opposed to industrial and commercial. I mean, I remember back in the 90s, and earlier even, there was the biggest fear and worry and concern was of this rampant commercial growth in the city, so everybody, I thought, was sort of okay with the housing, and it's kind of funny how you roll the clock ahead a decade, and now people are thinking, oh my God, they're actually going to be building housing up at Alewife,
Well, that's, I mean, a lot of the decisions have been backward looking. I mean, one of the consequences of the decision to reduce the amount of commercial development was particularly North Mass Avenue in North Cambridge. The housing began replacing buildings that had ground floor retail.
Right.
And people said, wait a minute, we didn't want that to happen.
Well, they actually recently, they've changed that.
They've changed that.
It, yeah.
But in order to make adjustments in the amount of growth possible under the zoning ordinance, they made reductions in those zones where ground floor commercial was a possibility. So if you built all housing, you could build a larger project than if you built a mixed use. They've now changed that regulation, so it's now easier to do ground floor retail and still do the housing necessary to make the project work. But again, it's not looking at sort of where we really want to go and where we need to go. You made the comment about city services. As long as the city is going to continue to provide services at the level it does without much higher residential property tax rates, there needs to be commercial growth.
Right.
65% of the property tax is paid by commercial. Commercial's about 33% of the valuation, and it's under 25% of the land use in the city. I think it's under 20.
Of course, the assessed value of a lot of the newer residential properties is so significant that I'm sure the residential property tax coming from a lot of the new buildings is not insignificant as well.
It's not, no, it is significant, and without the home, if they're rental properties, you're also not dealing with the home owner exemption.
Right.
The affordable units, not to get too much into the way the assessor's office does these things, I know enough to be dangerous, is those, 15% inclusionary units, the 15 inclusionary units in a 100-unit building change the valuation of the building somewhat,
Right.
because they're paying lower rent or they're sold at a lower rent or whatever. So, there's all these balances going on, and the needs of the city, I would contend we still, there's still things the city can probably do better, maybe can do cheaper. There's probably stuff the city's doing that it doesn't need to do, but that's,
Well, one of
That's very
the
hard.
things, again, we talk some more about that in the next half hour, but one of the things it seems to me is that if we are going to go through this whole citywide plan process, that there will be a lot of ideas generated, and many of those ideas will involve projects and initiatives that are going to cost money. So all the more reason to actually make sure we have a good stable tax base in order to take care of some of these things. Of course, some of the things will go beyond the ability
Right.
of the city alone to do, and actually require state money and state intervention as well.
right,
So,
but making it easier to do some things may make it easier without state or city money,
that's right.
for private
So,
money to do things.
all right, well, we have to take a break here, so we'll be back in about 3 minutes for part 2. So see you in a few.